8 players that you need to trade for before week 9 of your fantasy football leagues. We are pushing closer and closer to our goal of 1.5K subscribers. So if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. Helps us out a ton. The first guy I want to talk about here is Caleb Williams. So obviously he got off to a very hot start, but I will say that week 3 game against Dallas really helped boost his numbers early in the year. He's had a bunch of bad games in a row now, hasn't topped 20 points here in a month. And so I do think that there's an opportunity to buy him, especially in your 2 QB leagues. As a QB2, maybe you can improve your QB3 and turn him into Caleb Williams, depending on how much capital you spent on that QB3 position. And so I do think now is the time. He gets Cincinnati next week, then the Giants. And I do think those matchups he's going to take advantage of, and he's going to be very good. So in your Superflex leagues, especially, if you can move up from if you have a low end QB2 or maybe you have a high end QB3 and you can add a receiver or a running back to that and move up to get Caleb Williams, I think that's definitely something that you want to be entertaining at this point in time. Obviously not going to have as many issues with bye weeks this next week. So now might be a good time to try and get in on Caleb Williams. Next guy up is Christian McCaffrey. So obviously you're going to have to pay a ton to get Christian McCaffrey, but I do think that he's going to be worth it, right? He's been RB2 so far this year, and he has just been as good as advertised, except for this past week, right? So he finally had a bad game. The 49ers just never had the ball against Houston. Houston was able to keep them off the field for most of the game. The time of possession was lopsided in a big way towards Houston. And so that resulted in McCaffrey only getting 8 carries and only having 3 receptions, although he did still manage 6 targets. I do think moving forward, McCaffrey is still going to be a locked in top 3 running back, if not top 1. He looks healthy. He's on pace for a huge amount of carries. So after this game, it kind of helps a little bit, but I do think that there's a buying opportunity here, possibly with McCaffrey, right? He has a low volume game. The 49ers didn't look so good against a good defense, and maybe somebody will be inclined to move him. Now, obviously, you're going to have to pay up big time, and you have to include a star player, right? You can't just have 2 lower end options or 2 back end, like a back end wide receiver 1 and a back end running back 1. That's not going to work. So something like Breece Hall and Emeka Egbuka probably isn't going to get it done, right? You have to have a star player in there already to get McCaffrey, so if you have a Devon Achane, maybe that's where you start to try and move up into Christian McCaffrey, because otherwise I doubt that your league mate that has McCaffrey is going to be interested in dealing him for something where they're not getting a featured player back. Next guy up is Rico Dowdle. So I definitely think that Dowdle is worth acquiring at this point. Now, whether or not he's an RB2 or an RB3 or an RB4 or an RB1, do we really know? I mean, I don't know. He had those 2 monster games without Chuba Hubbard, and then Hubbard comes back and Hubbard plays more than him in both games and looks worse than him in both games. So this is more of a shot on Dowdle as the player. I do think that he is going to continue to have his role grow, even though Chuba Hubbard is back, right? We've seen it shrink back-to-back weeks as his snap percentage dropped to 46 in Chuba's first game back, and then we saw it drop again to 36 this week. There's no way that can continue. I don't think it's just going to be a nothing in the passing game like it was this week either, moving forward. So if somebody is panicking on Rico or thinks he's back to taking a back seat, this is somebody that I definitely want to try and acquire if I can get him for a bench player or 2. Somebody I think down the stretch is going to be able to help your roster and your starting lineups. So if you can go out, Wandale didn't have a great game this week, but, maybe you can center something around a player like that, a receiver like that on your bench. DJ Moore had a good game. Maybe you can start there if you still have DJ Moore and add somebody off of your bench. Maybe you have an Isaiah Pacheco, somebody like that you can bundle and get Rico Dowdle. I still have faith that Dowdle is going to be the one that you're going to want in this backfield for the rest of the season. And I have a lot of Chuba Hubbard. So Rico Dowdle, definitely somebody that I think that you should be looking to acquire on the cheap coming off these 2 bad games as his involvement is declining. The last running back that I think you should acquire is Aaron Jones. So he came back on Thursday night from IR, and I do think that he is going to reassume his role as a pass catcher and, should be getting in the range of 10 carries per game. He actually had more carries than Jordan Mason in this game. Jordan Mason had kind of been slowing down and then was really bad against the Chargers on Thursday night. So I do think seeing the 4 targets right away, seeing that he was out there for 53% of the snaps right away are both very encouraging signs for Aaron Jones. Last year, he had this huge workload, which was uncharacteristic for him anyways. He's much better when he's being used in that 15 opportunity type of range. And I do think he can start averaging 70 yards a game, every other game, maybe he scores type of thing. And we'll see if Jordan Mason gets the goal line role back or if Aaron Jones can get involved at all on the goal line. He was horrible last year on the goal line, so I don't know that that's going to be a role that he assumes. But overall, I do think it was encouraging to see him out there. Somebody that if the person in your league was just like happy that he played and then now might try and shop him is somebody that I would be interested in trying to acquire. Again, you're trying to get him for a lower end bench piece. I think he's probably fairly valued right in that David Montgomery area, somebody who could have good weeks and is going to have some bad weeks. But back end running back 2, top end running back 3 type of range, in that 25 to 30 running back range. So don't overpay for Aaron Jones, but if it's somebody that you can pay bench players for, this is somebody that I think can exceed expectations and be part of your starting lineup down the stretch. Next player up is Emeka Egbuka. So he's had 3 straight games now where he has not been very good. Obviously got hurt in week 6. And then was able to play through it in week 7, but didn't play very well. And then was out there again in week 8, didn't play very well again. So I don't know if it's a little bit of the injury, a little bit of that he was playing over his head, but I do think that this is somebody that is still worth trying to acquire. So right when he was going off at the beginning of the year, you're not going to be able to buy him for anything that's a reasonable price. But now that he's kind of slowed, his role is pretty established at this point. Mike Evans isn't coming back. Chris Godwin's still dealing with the same injuries, so he is going to be the number 1 wide receiver on this team pretty much for the rest of the year. I just think that if you can buy him now, going into his bye week, this is probably your best chance. He probably is on a good team in your league. The chances that he's been starting are pretty high, especially after that first game where he scored twice. So the team that has him might be less inclined to give him up, but if they are in a bad spot, I would definitely be throwing offers at Emeka Egbuka. Maybe you can start with a Cortland Sutton. You can start with a Devontae Smith, somebody in that range, and then add a running back to it to try and go up and get Emeka Egbuka. There's been quite a few injuries at running back now too. Add Scatterbo to the list. So I don't know if you even have the juice at running back to go up and get Egbuka, but definitely somebody that I think is going to be better than he has been over the last 3 weeks, especially with the bye week. Get a chance to get healthy, get in the training room a little bit more instead of trying to focus so much on getting on the field. And then he can come out in week 10 and be back to his regulars. Next guy up is T. Higgins. So what a disappointing week after the last 2 weeks where he got 8 and 10 targets with Joe Flacco. It just seemed like the volume was coming. It seemed like he was playing better. He even got a deep shot in this game and caught a 44-yard touchdown. I was all excited about that. And he only gets 2 targets while we have to watch Jamar Chase get 19 targets again in this game. It just seems obviously Chase is going to be the more targeted player, but this is not going to happen again. This 2 target type of game. Joe Flacco has looked great. Everybody's involved. T. Higgins is going to be better than this moving forward. And maybe the owner isn't super upset because they still got double-digit points despite the fact that it was only two targets and 1 catch. If somebody is worried about the reduced targets in this game, or you can convince somebody, look, that Jamar Chase is just hogging all of the passing game, and Joe Flacco has major eyes for him, having 23 and 19 targets in back-to-back games. Maybe somebody will be a little bit more inclined to sell T. Higgins. So overall, I do think moving forward, he's going to be very good. I do think he's going to be a locked-in starter. So if you can get him, I do think top 20 wide receiver is expected for the rest of the season. I'd be looking to possibly trade 1-for-1 with a running back if you need receiver help. I don't know that T. Higgins is somebody that necessarily fits super well on a 2-for-1 moving up. And if you can add him to a better running back to move up, maybe this is the perfect type of player that you could add to an Achane to get to Christian McCaffrey, that type of thing, if somebody buys the role. But overall, I think 1-for-1 is probably the most likely trade you can get done for T. Higgins. Maybe you have a DeAndre Swift who has been playing really well. Maybe you don't want to sell Swift for T. Higgins, but maybe it could be somebody a little bit lower. Maybe Alvin Kamara, who's been struggling a little bit, and maybe the T. Higgins owner really needs running back help. So just a couple ideas there in that running back 20 to 25 range, I think is pretty reasonable if the owner needs a running back and is pretty stacked up at wide receiver. The last receiver we're going to talk about here is Quentin Johnston. So talk about stark difference between the beginning and then the rest of the season so far. He had those first 4 weeks where he genuinely looked like he was ascending to be the Chargers' number 1 wide receiver, that he was going to be a top 20 wide receiver in fantasy. That's somebody that you could rely on quite a bit. He had 7, 10, and 13 targets, so he was heavily involved. And then he got hurt, and now it's just been like Gadsden's been way more involved, and like McConkey has started to come on in a big way, and Keenan Allen had an 11 catch game in there one of those weeks. So I'm not entirely sure what to think here, right? He had 52% snap share, so is he still hurt? Is there something wrong? Should he even be playing? I don't know. I based on the fact that he didn't play against Miami, he didn't do very well against Indianapolis, and then he was barely involved against Minnesota, I just am not sure he should be playing if he's still hurt. So this is a weird case here because obviously you're not dropping him, and obviously you're not going to be giving up a ton for him anymore either, right? So that's how I would try and trade for him, right? It's like, well, he obviously got off to this hot start, but like, he was a waiver claim. What exactly is your price point here on Quentin Johnston? That's how I would approach trading for him at this point. So, if you can get him on the cheap, I do think it's worth checking in on, because if he does get healthy, does get back to seeing 7, 8, 9 targets a game, then I do think he could be productive. Now, there's a chance if you trade for him that he's not going to be usable anymore this year. There's definitely that chance. If Ladd is going to reassume the number 1 and Gadsden is going to continue to be heavily involved in the offense, there's just not a ton of room for Quentin Johnston because Keenan Allen is going to continue to operate in the slot. And so he's going to turn into maybe at best the 3rd option on any given week. So, there's that chance. Now, does he get healthy and reascend to the top of the depth chart as the deep threat? There's that possibility as well, which is why I would definitely be trying to acquire him onto my rosters, but I'm not going to be paying anything, super expensive for him anymore. Like, for example, I was trying to trade DeAndre Swift to get him 2 weeks ago. There's no way I'd even consider that anymore. Maybe David Montgomery is somebody that you can trade to try and get him. And I think that would be a reasonable price. The last guy we're going to talk about here is Tyler Warren. So I do really like Tyler Warren. This is somebody that if you're going to try and acquire, you got to make sure that you're going to be trying to purchase very high. Don't come in super low and insult whoever has Tyler Warren. But he is coming off a single-digit game this week, right? So he has had a month straight of just being awesome. Didn't score in this game. Didn't have a ton of targets either. So, the 4 for 53, definitely his worst game in a month. And so maybe there's a chance that whoever has Warren in your league, the roster is just kind of falling apart. Didn't look very good. Lost last week because they had buys or injuries. And you have a tight end that could be good enough to move into Tyler Warren's spot on that team's roster, right? So you have somebody in the Jake Ferguson, Dallas Goedert, Harold Van Jr., somebody like that, that has been playing pretty well, that you could use and then add a very good player to in order to go up and get Tyler Warren. So I do think Warren over the rest of the year is going to continue to be really good. This game was definitely a Michael Pittman game, which is going to happen from time to time. But overall, Tyler Warren, top 1 or 2 option in the passing game in Indianapolis, and Daniel Jones is going to be continuing to look for him a lot throughout the year. The other option you could explore too is if you need players and you have a Trey McBride or you have a Brock Bowers who's coming back likely in week 9, you could try and trade one of those guys and get Tyler Warren plus something else off of that team's bench if their roster is decently loaded, and I think that would be something where you wouldn't see a ton of drop off at tight end, and you could get another potential flex player. So if you have Bowers, if you had McBride, you need roster help, I would definitely look to the Tyler Warren owner and see if there's anything that can get done there. All right, and with that, thank you guys so much for watching. Look forward to talking to you in the next one.